Good morning, everybody. Good morning, dear colleagues. As we have a very tight schedule and very short time frame for an interesting first point on the agenda, I would like to start immediately, as I see all those members who are have to be here are here for the first point on the agenda. Let me announce the linguistic profile of our meeting today. Unfortunately, we don't have interpretation in Danish, Maltese, Croatian, and Gaelic. We have to endorse the coordinators' recommendation on nomination of rapporteurs. Mr. Corrao, EFDD, has been appointed rapporteur for the draft report on automated data exchange with regard to vehicle registration data in Portugal. Does the committee endorse the coordinator's recommendation? I don't see any objections. I take it yes. Then on delegated and implementing acts, I have news on 3 dossiers. On delegated regulation of 13 December 2017, as regards adding Sri Lanka, Trinidad and Tobago and Tunisia to the table in point 1 of the annex. After having extended the scrutiny deadline and having received a request to object by 3 members of ECON and LIBE, a joint ECON-LIBE coordinators written procedure was launched on the 12th of January. A majority to object was found among LIBE and ECON coordinators, and they agreed to work in English only. The deadline to amend was set on the 23rd of January by 5 o'clock p.m. A joint ECON-LIBE committee meeting will take place on the 29th of January from 6:30 to 8 o'clock p.m. A possible vote on the motion to object would also take place that day, as to ensure a plenary vote in February the first part session. On 16 January, the European Parliament received the Commission implementing regulation laying down rules for application of Directive 2016-1148 as regards further specification of the elements to be taken into account by digital service providers for managing the risk posed to the security of network and information systems. The Basic Act concerning measures for a high common level security of network and information system across the Union. And then, again, one announcement I have to make. On the 16th January, the European Parliament received the Commission implementing decision establishing the list of supporting documents to be submitted by applicants for short-stay visas in Australia, Bangladesh, Ethiopia, South Africa, Thailand, and Zambia. So the reception of these implementing acts was communicated to all LIBE members via the LIBE Committee newsletter. And what else is important, we have an electronic vote today at 11 o'clock. And please make sure that your cards, you will have your cards with you. And now, if there are no objections to the minutes, they are all approved, the minutes of the 6th and 8th of December, 6th of November and 8th of December. And I jump immediately to the first point on our agenda. We will hear the presentation of the draft delegation report of the LIBE-PANA ad-hoc delegation to Malta, which has taken place on the 13th November, 1st December 2017. Allow me to welcome also members of the former PANA committee who are present in the exchange of views. I also welcome the Malta Minister for Justice, Dr. Ovan Bonici, which is requested to take part in this debate. And I have just learned that also the sons of the late Daphne Caruana are among us, so I welcome also them on our LIBE meeting, and I would like to express my deepest condolences to you. Now, let's go to the work. As you know, this mission was organized as a follow-up to a decision of the coordinators and the request of the Conference of Presidents. The Conference of Presidents decided that an 8-member ad hoc delegation composed of 1 member from each political group and preferably drawn from the Committee of Civil Liberties and the Committee of Inquiry into Money Laundering, Tax Avoidance and Tax Evasion be sent to Malta. I will give immediately the floor to Mrs. Ana Gomez as chair of the delegation to present the main findings of this mission report. As we have a very short time frame, I will really ask Mrs. Gomez to try to keep 10 minutes, and then all other colleagues, the coordinators and other members, 2 minutes, please. I will be very strict with the time in order to everybody could speak this morning. Mrs. Gomez, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. And first of all, let me also welcome the Minister here. That's exactly what we want, to continue engaged with the authorities and the stakeholders in Malta to indeed clarify many of the matters that need to be clarified, as anyone reading the report that we made of this mission can see. The report is fairly descriptive of what we went through. And let me also welcome, of course, the three sons of late Ms. Daphne Caruana Galizia, and I share, as all of us, your condolences addressed to the family. The report, as I said, is fairly descriptive. We know of what the context, what we made, what we were told in Malta. Of course, members prepared themselves, got information, asked questions, and got answers. And what is also important in the report is the second part, where we state our main findings, so I will spare you from reading them now, and we make recommendations. Recommendations to the authorities of Malta, recommendations to the European authorities, because of course what we are dealing with in Malta is not just concerning Malta, it concerns us all. It's about the European Union as a whole. And it affects us all in the sense that it has implications for, indeed, for instance, anti-money laundering or money laundering, corruption, and so on. So it's a matter of general concern and even, I would say, of our own security. I think my statement now at this stage is probably more useful if I state the facts that came out of these contacts we had in Malta. First of all, that there are two people that were exposed in the Panama Papers and that were object of on Maltese FIU reports, PEPs, so politically exposed persons, members of governments, who stay in government. One of them is a minister, Mr. Mizzi. Another one is the chief of cabinet of the prime minister, Mr. Schembri. That is a fact. They are people seen as corrupt throughout Malta. There are FIU reports that have been leaked into the public that document that, and there was no action on that, at least from the police. The police and the Attorney General did not act on these FIU reports, that some of them are public. And there are, nevertheless, 5 ongoing judicial inquiries, which I point out, if they conclude that there is elements, will need to be followed up by some police action. In these 5 judicial inquiries, one is being blocked by the government. Exactly, it was initiated by the then leader of the opposition. It's been blocked by the government. It's exactly on these politically exposed persons that were exposed by the Panama Papers and by the FIU reports. Of course, another very tragic fact is that Ms. Daphne Caruana Galizia was assassinated, and she was a main blogger, journalist, exposing corruption, and in particular exposing some of these people that were also exposed by Panama Papers. In the meantime, 2 days after we left Malta, actually, the material authors or the suspects of being the material authors of assassination were found. They are under arrest. If nothing happens to them, they will be brought to trial. And I hope they will be able to clarify who ordered the murder, because it's obvious that people from the criminal world were behind this bombing. The question is who ordered the bombing and what was the purpose. It's disturbing that the family complains that they have never been informed. They were not informed, namely, that these material authors had been caught, and even certain aspects related to the natural interaction between the family and the investigative authorities has not occurred. Another fact is that a former Maltese commissioner, Mr. John Daly, that was forced to resign for very serious corruption, bribery allegations, despite the fact that he was the object of a very serious and detailed Olaf investigation, and also of a own Maltese FIU report. Nothing happened to him, was never charged, and indeed he was made an advisor to the Prime Minister. And it's particularly important because often in Malta we hear interpretations that there is a tit for tat, a political dispute between the two main parties. But actually this person belonged to the Nationalist Party and became an advisor to the Prime Minister of the other party. So establishing why there was no action, what's the connection, is really very important, and this has never been done. Another fact, Mr. Ferris, a major whistleblower, which we met, was an FIU investigator, was a former police investigator, was dismissed, asked for whistleblower status that exists thanks to the current government in Malta. But 2 months have passed, and despite our own pressing with the Prime Minister, with the Chief of the Police, that affording him protection and his family was really important, 2 months have passed and he still doesn't have whistleblower status, and there are reports that he's been asked to first disclose to government information that he has in his possession. Another fact, there is a sale of passports, nationality. It's in a program called Individual Investment Program. There are evidence that there is a very corrupt business that involves, for instance, a company, Hanley and Partners, Nexia BT, that they are involved as well, Panama Papers revelations. To this, we don't have a list of awardees of this IIP, despite the fact that in Malta, normally a list of people naturalized, who are given nationality via naturalization, is published. Why is this not clearly stated publicly? Who are they? It's disturbing, and we have asked for that. Didn't got that so far. Another fact is that there is a very disturbing relation between Pilatus Bank, the bank at the center of this whole investigation as well, and Azerbaijani PEPs. I must say that last night, some of us, actually the first hour of this day, we received the communication from Pilatus Bank. I had no time to go through in detail it. I'm sure that the members of the delegation will analyze it. But the fact is that this connection is there. It's even acknowledged that the business model of the bank is quite unsustainable. So this is a fact, and it should worry all, and in particular the government of Malta. And another fact, the Anti-Money Laundering Directive number 4, which was supposed to be enforced in all member states since June last year, is still not being implemented in Malta. I could refer to many other facts, namely the libel cases abroad in the foreign jurisdictions against Maltese journalists, that of course with the aim of gagging them. But I would just end saying I have questions. I would like to ask questions if we would have time, namely to the Minister who very importantly came here to engage with us. I don't know if I have questions now. If there is an opportunity, I'll ask these questions. And they are related to these facts and to the answers that the answers they should provide. I just would ask one question at this moment. Mrs. Daphne Caruana Galizia published a chain of leaked emails on the 31st of May last year that was showing that His Excellency the Minister here, also the Prime Minister and other members of government, together with Enlian Partners, which is the company that operates this sale of passport scheme, were threatening financially ruinous legal action in UK courts against Ms. Daphne Caruana Galizia. It's weird that there is this conspiration, so to say, of national authorities with this corporation to threaten an independent journalist and a blogger. How could this be explained? That's the question I raise, I leave with the Minister. And of course there are many other questions, but I don't think that in the 10 minutes that I was given I can put them now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Gomez. Well, I've got again a task which is impossible to fulfill, because we have 1 hour in the time frame of today's meeting, and I have so many speakers. I will announce how this will work out. We will have the first, the coordinators round. We will have the coordinators from LIBE and PANA coordinators respectively. Then we go to the members of the mission to take the floor, and then to other members of the committee, because we have, and I will really ask you to keep under 2 minutes, because it's impossible even to the members to take the floor if we continue, even if we do our best. So please, Mrs. Metsola first.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to start by thanking the delegation for doing their job, for their resoluteness and thoroughness in circumstances that are far from easy. Let me make it clear that the rot that this report uncovered does not represent the characteristics of the majority of the people of Malta and Gozo, but it does prove how urgently change is needed. The delegation met with the Prime Minister, civil society, whistleblowers, the Chief Justice, journalists, the police. They got a very clear picture of the situation. Not that we needed a delegation of MEPs to tell us that it is outrageous that the police have refused to even investigate, let alone prosecute accusations of corruption and money laundering by government politicians and their dodgy banks, or that whistleblowers must be protected and not harassed and targeted, or that journalists must be free to write without being murdered, or that this culture of impunity must end. All this should have been self-evident. Now, our Prime Minister dismissed the delegation with a smirk and a shrug. Just this week, 100 days since her assassination, his envoy stood up in the Council of Europe, of all places, to tell Daphne Caruana Galizia's sons, who are with us here today, that everything is fine in Malta and that their mother was free to write what she liked. Their answer was, how could you say that when she was murdered for what she wrote? That gives you an idea of how this administration operates. Now, our Prime Minister's machine spared no time in going after me, civil society, my Maltese colleagues, and all members of the delegation, with Anna Gomez in particular being singled out. And they will continue. But we will not bow down to this intimidation. This is what we are doing here. We are standing up, because if we stand up for something, we will not fall. Malta deserves to be one country where checks and balances exist more than just on paper, where the law cannot be abused to protect the crooked, and where journalists can write without being blown up. This is how the rule of law should function, and our job here is to show everyone, and everyone watching, that Maltese and Goddesans should not be characterised by these crooks with everything to lose. And as a result, we will keep pushing for necessary changes to be made.
Thank you, Mrs. Metsola. Mrs. Zippel for S&D, please.
Thank you very much. Let me start with saying that we had PANA papers and Paradise papers, and why? Because journalists did a very good job, and that's why then we started a PANA committee here in the House, and we hopefully start another committee by end of next month. Was it the content of PANA and Paradise papers that led to the mission in Malta? No. It was the killing of a journalist that led to the fact that we had to do a mission to Malta. And here we have two things we need to follow upon. The first question is, coming from all the papers, the question of corruption and money laundering, checking if this is individual cases, if it is a systematic thing that is happening, but also, and even more worrying, of course, the question who demanded the killing of a journalist. All this leads to the fact that we do need more investigation, that we have to find out what is going on, and that we have to check all the two areas, and that's why I really hope we will have the additional committee here in the House. At the same time, I really appreciate the fact that the Minister of Justice of Malta today is with us. I'm quite convinced he will have his own ideas how to react to the report and all the things that are in it. But if possible, I would like to add one or the other question, and if it's not possible due to the time restraints that he is answering to all of this, maybe he can give some answers also later on in writing. So I will only add two questions. The one is that the Office of the Attorney General regularly undergoes scrutiny by the Council of Europe's GRECO, and I would like to know if you can tell us what the recent assessment says. And a second question, how does your system of inquiring, investigating the magistrates' work in Malta? Are you investigating any or all of the allegations mentioned by Daphne Caruana Galizia in her writings, and what are the developments over there? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Zippel. Now for the PANA coordinator, Mr. Simon for S&D.
Vielen Dank, Frau Vorsitzende.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just wait until everyone's got their headphones on. I would like to thank the delegation for the report they've presented. Once again, we are confronted with a lot of questions relating to a member state of the EU. This is not the first time that in the Panama Committee and in the Special Committee on Tax 1 and 2, before that, it's not the first time that we've been confronted with a situation where things are going on in a member state which require further investigation. So I think it's important that we set down a marker here in the Parliament by continuing the work that was done by the Panama Committee of Inquiry in a form of a special committee which would, as Mrs. Gomez suggested, have to deal with the question of Malta, but also the situation in other issues in other member states. I think we would have to work in a very objective way, in a very clear way, and in the parameters that we use, we have to ensure that the member states enjoy the same rights as afforded to third countries by the European Commission. We have a list of, we have the Commission's list of tax havens, and when there is, it was simply enough to suggest to the Commission that that be revised for a whole series of countries to be taken off the list. There are, however, in relation to Malta and other countries, questions, however, and in-house, I think we need to check very carefully the questions that have been raised, and where in the European Parliament and in the European Union we have to draw conclusions from those. But I think initially we need to start with that close examination before we reach any other conclusions.
From ECR we have for the PANA coordinator, Mr. Lucke.
Vielen Dank, Frau.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would also like to thank the delegation that went to Malta. You always have to ask the question of what would have happened if the European Parliament had not decided to send a delegation there after this scandalous assassination of Daphne, who would have done anything about the situation in Malta, because it is clear from the report that we're not talking about a one-off here. We're talking about structural difficulties that Malta has and structural shortcomings which are reflected in the fact that law enforcement does not work effectively, that it's extremely slow, that there is clearly incentives for corruption and nepotism in Malta, and that there are practices which are not in line with the democratic practice in a state. And there seems to be a general acceptance that votes can be bought, just like citizenship can be bought, and in some cases it's not even clear who this citizenship is being sold to for very high amounts. So these are issues in relation to member states that need to be taken into account and addressed. And the question now is how we take this further. The European Parliament is not in a position to play the role of guardian of the treaties. In principle, that is the Commission's role. It doesn't. It has enough resources perhaps to go to Malta and see if the situation is improved. But I think we have to find some format to continue to observe the situation in Malta and assess any changes or improvements. So I think that's what we need to discuss here, so that the murder of Daphne and the shortcomings that we have now seen will not simply be the subject of a report, but there will actually be follow-up.
For the LIBE ALDE coordinator, Mrs. Intveld.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I would like to welcome once more the Caruana Galizia brothers. Very pleased to see you here, and I'm pleased that the Minister is here. I have to say that when I read the report, I was very shocked. We had heard talk about corruption, but then when we read the details, I thought, you know, this is something we don't see every day in the European Union. This is really bad. And it's describing practices that were apparently so dark and murky that somebody felt it was worth killing for. So that means that it's important enough to cover it, to uncover it. Now, Mr. Muscat has dismissed the European Parliament, which he wasn't once a member of, and I think that's regrettable, because dismissing Parliament means dismissing the citizens of Europe, the citizens who are watching. But I think it is also misguided, because this is a very serious matter, and I think, like Mr. Lucke, the European Union has a very important role in clearing this up, because the European Union is as strong as its weakest link, and it's clear that Malta is becoming a weak link. Because what does this mean for police and justice cooperation? I'm thinking, for example, of the Financial Intelligence Unit in Europol. I mean, if we cannot rely on the information that's fed into the system, then how are we going to ensure security and law throughout the European Union? Because we cannot work, we have to work on the basis of the presumption of compliance and not the pretense of compliance. Now, a couple of questions I would like to put to the Minister and also the European Commission. The murder of Daphne Caruana Galizia was 3 months ago yesterday. So what progress is being made in the investigation? And can somebody explain to me if the arrest of the 3 people has to be taken seriously? Because I don't know, I'm not a policeman, but if I read about this in the newspaper, it seems to me that this is all a charade. I mean, these people, this was a political murder. It wasn't somebody who wanted to steal her purse. So it doesn't look very serious to me. What about the independence of the lead investigator? Then a question about the golden visas, which is something, incidentally, which Malta may have elaborated a little bit more, but we have similar schemes in many other member states, and it is about time, I think, that the EU regulates it. Yes, I'm coming to a conclusion, Madam Chair. The way that we also regulate residency rights for refugees, for example. But I would like to know, simple question, how much money did it bring in? I would like to know. And how do you do the screening of the people requesting golden visas? Because they're not little old grannies from Russia. I have the feeling that we're bringing in a lot of criminal money. And the final question, the Commission has decided to, yes, final question, Madam Chair, has decided to abolish the annual corruption report and deals with corruption in the context of the European semester. I would like to know from the Commission, how are we going to deal with something like this if we don't do it in an annual report? Thank you.
Mrs. Pagazza, as ALDE coordinator for the PANA committee, I will ask you, please try to stick to the 2-minute time frame. We won't manage. You will take the floor take the time from other colleagues. Please, Mrs. Pagazza.
Sí, por supuesto, Presidenta. Bien.
Yes, of course, Chair. I would like to thank the MEPs who carried out this mission, thank them for what they have given us, and what we have found out is absolutely horrible. I would like to know if this request for information on these personal investment programs and the list will be accessible to us. I would like to indicate that perhaps we are not guardians of the treaties, but we have political competency because this is a parliament. And I think that we have the political and moral responsibility to look into what is going on and what took place with Daphne Caruana Galizia. We must move forward, and we cannot leave by the wayside our commitment. We cannot just use words. We need to keep moving forward and carry out some kind of follow-up based on what has been investigated. Our job is not yet done because there are structural issues, because the second article of the treaty is affected. We can see this in Malta, and so I'd like to say thank you, and I would like to know if those who went to Malta will be able to give us sufficient information. Thank you.
Now for the PANA committee, the coordinator for the Greens, Mr. Gilgold.
Thank you. First, colleagues, thank you for the good cooperation in the last year, really. And thank you to the Minister and in particular also to the sons of Daphne Galizia to be here. And I would like that we try to find the possibility that they can also have the floor, because I think that would be normal that they have the possibility to say what they want the European Parliament to do. But I don't want to repeat anything. I think what was the most revealing for me during the last visit was that we learned that this is not only about money laundering and the Panama Papers revelations, but that there is a much more systemic culture of impunity. So we learned that there are basically no high-level cases of corruption which led to prosecution, although there were regularly strong hints to this. So why is the gas contract to Electrogas not properly investigated? Why is the privatization of hospitals not be properly investigated? Why is it that we have a member state where the Chief Justice says it's a deterioration of the rule of law? This is all very serious, and the number of cases is much longer. We also have signs of influencing voters with public contracts. Also, this didn't lead to an investigation. Therefore, I think we have to be serious. We also have to be serious on Nexia BT, where we learned that they didn't do fully use European law, and they didn't do properly the due diligence. And still, there was no investigation. So I think it is important that this changes. And therefore, I call on the Commission to follow up their work, discuss it with us, and also hope that the Parliament will continue with its work. And I have one question to the Minister. Can you inform the Parliament about your exchange of information with the European Commission? I know there is an exchange of information because the Commission is looking into these allegations. And can you inform our Parliament about what you had to say about this in writing, and can we get a written response to our report? This would be very helpful for our further work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gilgold. I agree with your suggestion that we should listen to a few words to the sons of Mrs. Daphne Caruana. What I suggest, as you were also a member of the you participated in the mission, you would have 2 minutes as a member of the mission, so you will give your 2 minutes at the end to the sons, if you agree with that.
I'm very happy to donate
Thank
these
you.
minutes
so
to
then let's
the
continue with I have on my coordinators list Mrs. Kappel for the ENF present. All the coordinators spoke, so we turn now to the members of the mission who were present in Malta. Mr. Casa, please.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I wish to express my appreciation to colleagues for the professionalism with which this report was drawn up. The report is clear, and the issues that must be addressed are clear too. The main concern is, of course, that persons at the highest levels of government found to be involved in criminal activity remain in office today. Those who created the money laundering structures still hold a license, and the bank that was used to launder the money remains operational. And all the while, reports from Malta's FIAU calling for police action against these people remain ignored. The impunity is shocking. It is against this backdrop that journalist Daphne Caruana Galizia was assassinated. Daphne's targets continue to hold high public office. Pilatus Bank continues to hold a license to operate in the EU. Nexia BT is still awarded government contracts. Today, Minister Owen Bonici is here with us, but what is he here to tell us? He will tell us that his government introduced legislation on whistleblowers, but he won't tell us that they only protect the whistleblowers who support his government. He will tell us that they introduced a law that removes prescription on corruption, but he won't tell us that they have made political hostages of the FIAU and the police so his colleagues can never be prosecuted. He will tell us that they have introduced a new media law, but he won't tell us that Daphne Caruana Galizia's assets remained frozen at the time of her assassination because of legal action by the deputy leader of his own party. He will tell us that magisterial inquiries are ongoing in Malta. But he will not tell us that the Prime Minister filed an appeal to prevent some of the most important revelations from being investigated. He will try to frame this debate as some sort of attack on Malta. But no, this fight is for Malta, for the Maltese and against the corrupt government.
Thank you, Mr. Casa. Mrs. Grappini, please.
Mulțumesc foarte mult. Mulțumesc și
Thank you very much. I am grateful that I had the opportunity to be part of the Malta delegation. Let me start with the conclusions, because colleagues have already mentioned a lot. First, I think this period of analysis is too short. I don't think we should stop here with this report and with this analysis. I doubt that we were able to meet all the interested parties. I think we should take more time for our analysis on the Malta situation because, for example, we didn't have the chance to talk to all the representatives of the civil society or the mass media. We did not get answers to our questions from the General Prosecutor, for example, from the Attorney General. I asked him personally, why does the investigation in the murder of Daphne Caruana Galizia take so long? And he didn't give me an answer. Then when we met with the press, we didn't get answers to the question whether they got the full reports when they wrote those articles about the financial scandals. So we didn't get answers to a lot of questions, and I think we should be very careful, because I think we should be even-handed here. For example, of course, we met with the network of the civil society. We met a gentleman, Mr. Michael Di Guglio, who is also a councillor of the Nationalist Party. So I think I don't know how ethical this is, because we need to be careful with these things. We cannot toy with the citizens' rights or with the citizens' lives, because a journalist has been murdered here. Let's not forget about that. I think in Malta, citizens' rights to free expression should be better defined and respected. We were surprised to meet a so-called mass media representative, Mr. Austin Gatt, who used to be a minister and who was involved in a huge oil-related corruption scandal. There was talk about a Swiss bank account and so on. Let's say all these things. I don't think we should think with our political belonging. We should think about the most important thing, which is the security of the citizens of Malta and the rights of the citizens of Malta. So, in my opinion, I think we should take more time to analyze the situation in Malta in order to get a clear picture. Thank you.
Haji Giorgio.
Thank you, Chairperson. I firstly want to thank really Mrs. Gomez and all the other members of the mission to Malta because of our brilliant cooperation. I was also shocked of the results of this mission, but I want to underline that this is not a Maltese problem. This is a European problem. If we fail to see that, then we will fail to help Malta. In Malta, there are very, very dark procedures, and they have to deal with that, and they have to clear it up. For example, Pilatus Bank. How can we digest that the bank has just 130 stakeholders and at the same time imaginable amount of money in their deposits? It's something which we cannot understand and we cannot digest, as I said. The third thing I want to say, because the members of the mission already said everything, is something about Mrs. Maria Efimova, who is a whistleblower, and she talked to us too through Skype. There is a warrant against her in Cyprus for different issues, and I don't know if these things are related to the fact that she is a whistleblower. I, with Mrs. Gomez, already wrote a letter to the Attorney General of Cyprus to tell us something about these allegations and why there is an international and a European warrant against her. Lastly, I want also to welcome here the sons of Mrs. Caruana Galizia and to express to them our condolences too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now I turn to the other members of the committee who wanted to take the floor, wish to take the floor. I have 3 members who indicated to intervene, Mr. Becker, Mrs. Fayon, and Mr. Zamit. I close now the list of interventions. Mr. Becker, please try to be shorter than 2 minutes. Help me with the time. Thank you.
Yes, Chair, I will do my best. Many thanks to our colleague Ana Gomez for her report on the mission to Malta. And the key consequences we can draw today, not only regarding rule of law, money laundering, but on an unbelievable case of murder suspect, which with a very serious background of tremendous corruption, seemingly even protected by justice and police authorities. In the government top level and the direct influence circles around. Let me first of all make clear that the great people of Malta do not deserve this picture in the world. The responsible government officials should have had stepped back since months. We must support the Maltese people and strongly continue to prosecute the criminal and corrupt members in the highest ranking around the present Maltese government even. So it is fully unacceptable that criminal power elements there in Malta even call for arresting MEP David Casa, our European Parliament's #1 fighter to bring political clarifications in the judicial accusments regarding Panama Papers, cruel, brutal murder. I tell you, all responsible officials in Malta, from here, including your Minister of Justice, David Casa has our full support, and you will not succeed. esteemed people of Malta, stand up against these people in your country. You can rely on David Casa and the European Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. Now, Mrs. Fayon, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would, of course, first thank to our delegation to Malta for drafting the report. There are many facts in the report, but there are also many allegations that still has to be investigated. And the report and this debate today clearly show that lots of work has still to be done. It shows also that this report doesn't reflect the one and only one opinion, and that the society in Malta is very polarized. It is impossible at this point for us to establish a complete picture. We are daily receiving new information that we are taking seriously, but we are not, unfortunately, and we can do and are doing our recommendations, but the real credible, proper and independent job has to be done with the responsible authorities in Malta. Therefore, I am very glad that the Minister for Justice is here today with us. As I understood some of our participants in the delegation today, they didn't get all the answers, or some of the answers or speakers were even biased, and I also would have some questions. For example, what measures has the government undertaken in order to enhance the independence and impartiality of the judiciary, or how does the system of inquiring, investigating magistrates work in Malta? Are the magistrates investigating any of the allegations mentioned by Daphne Caruana Galizia in her writings? I'm also glad that the sons of Daphne Caruana Galizia are here with us. I recently hosted them in one of our S&D events here in the building, where we discussed the media freedom in the European Union, and their contribution was very important. And I can just conclude, we will continue checking the facts, there is no doubt, and we will continue our dialogue with all interested in the Maltese situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fayon. Mr. Zamit, please.
I cannot but start by saluting Andrew and Matthew Caruana Galizia, two of Daphne Caruana Galizia's sons who are here with us. The brutal killing of your mother was not just a murder to silence a person who has always, with great courage, struggled to make the truth emerge. But it was also an attack on our freedom of speech, because our freedom of speech is a freedom which ensures that we follow what Daphne Caruana Galizia tried to emerge. And she tried to emerge cases of corruption, which we are discussing today. I cannot but insist on the lack of action that the government has taken on the rule of law in Malta. Lack of action by the government on all that has emerged by the committee that has travelled and visited Malta. The answer by Malta's Prime Minister was that he only takes care of what the ministers in Malta say and not what the MEPs say. He, by doing so, was ignoring the voice of the citizens of the EU. We should make the best to defend the freedom of press, and we have also presented a law on the so-called SLAPS practice, so that banks such as Pilatus and companies such as Henley and Partners are stopped, and these actions which they usually take against laws in the EU are stopped. These are very serious actions which we should take, because when you silence the press, you are attacking the freedom of EU citizens to follow what is relevant to us.
Thank you, colleagues, for your very disciplined intervention and taking care of the time frame. So now I turn to the Minister. You will have 5 minutes to answer the questions, and then I will give the floor to the Commission, because the Commission also got some questions today, but I will ask them to try to be very short and try to give the answer in 2 minutes. So Minister Bonici, you have the floor for a short intervention.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. And thank you for allowing me the opportunity to be here today and to discuss with you this subject. Of course, in 5 minutes, I can't answer all your questions. I think I can't answer even a fraction of your questions. But I am available anytime, at any place, to come here again to answer all the questions you would like me to answer. As a government, we are intent to portray the correct picture of Malta. This is the picture which you have spoken about today is not the real picture of Malta. This is not a correct picture of Malta. And we are keen to engage in dialogue to portray a correct picture of Malta. Just to put you in the picture. A few days after the horrendous murder of Daphne Caruana Galizia, which shocked everyone in Malta and in Europe, and I of course extend my condolences to the family of Daphne Caruana Galizia. I can understand their anger. I can then understand how they are feeling today and how they have felt in the past days. That has shocked us to the core. A few days after the murder of Daphne Caruana Galizia, one of the leading newspapers in Malta made a survey about the rule of law institutions, and they asked the people, and this is a newspaper usually very critical of the government. It's not a newspaper which lauds the government. It's called the Sunday Times of Malta. And they have asked the people, do you trust the armed forces of Malta? And 72% said yes. They asked the people, do you trust the government? 72% said yes. They asked the people, do you trust the police? 69% said yes. They asked the people, do you trust the media? 51% said yes. So this is a snapshot of what this newspaper surveyed the people and the results it got. So I have to go back to the report, which unfortunately carries a fundamental lack of understanding as to the role of the various institutions in Malta, which it describes how these institutions perform their duties and their power under statutes. What's even worse, that the people who wrote the report relied on recommendations which are either out of date or incorrect. Criticisms are made of the constitutional structures within Malta or of decisions made by the Maltese government, even though other member states operate similar systems or have made identical decisions. The government has brought about a significant amount of reform. I have a whole list here of reforms we have done in the past 5 years. And we are intent to continue this work with dedication and diligence. And this has not been sufficiently drawn out in the mission report. I have been asked by one of your colleagues whether excuse me, sir, I haven't interrupted anyone, and I'm not here to engage in spats. I'm here to talk, to answer all your questions, anytime, anywhere, in any place. We're open for a constructive debate. We here as a government want the truth to come out. We want to present the true picture of Malta to the European Parliament and to the European institutions. A person from within the floor, from this floor, asked me, but Minister, can you tell me, are the allegations, the most serious allegations, being investigated right now? The answer is yes. In Malta, we have a system where any person can go with any information in front of an inquiring magistrate, and the inquiring magistrate can investigate any information given to it by any citizen. And all the main issues, all the main stories, all the main allegations written about by Daphne Caruana Galizia are currently being investigated by the judiciary, including one which is of a very serious nature, which the Prime Minister himself asked the judiciary to investigate these allegations. So when you tell me that there is no rule of law and no accountability or no transparency in Malta, this is not true, because all the main allegations are being investigated by the judiciary at the request of either the former leader of the opposition or the Prime Minister himself. I would like to mention now some of the reforms which we have undertaken, because the idea that this government has thrown the rule of law in a dustbin is completely false. It's completely unfair and unfounded. We have removed prescription of corrupt offences committed by politicians for the rest of their lifetime. So politicians in Malta, if they commit corruption at one point in time, they are liable to be prosecuted throughout the whole of their life. Now, mention another country in the EU which has a similar piece of legislation. We have also introduced a Whistleblowers Protection Act. And I'm sorry to say that Ms. Gomez, whom I respect, is not understanding clearly how a whistleblower's legislation works. I don't think she has any fault in that, because whistleblower protection legislations are so rare in Europe. You don't find many whistleblower protection legislation. Probably Malta and possibly 2 or 3 other European member states. But in order for a person to acquire protection, he has to make a disclosure. It's inherent in the way a whistleblower protection mechanism works. And if a bona fide person makes a disclosure, he is automatically afforded protection. So all this talk of the government needing to make a decision, it's incorrect. Now, in the case of Mr. Ferris, who I have to say that Ms. Efimova, who was also mentioned this morning, had a lot of reservations about him. Mr. Ferris wants to have a whistleblower protection because he intends to obtain immunity from prosecution for the violation of the provision which prohibits information from a FIAU to be published. Now, there is this principle which is found in all FATF principles and Egmont principles on financial transactions, which prohibits people from publishing information which is confidential. Now, Mr. Ferris wants to breach that provision, and he's trying to use the whistleblower protection in order to do that. Now, I want to mention more efforts which we've done to...
Bonici, Minister, I will have to ask you to try to finish.
Yes,
okay?
just 1 minute, so that I diffuse this incorrect picture which was made that Malta is not working hard to improve the rule of law. We have established a judicial appointments committee, for instance, for the first time. Before, judges used to be appointed by politicians directly. Under our watch, we have created a commission which is made up of independent people, including the Chief Justice, which makes strong advice on whom to appoint in the judiciary. Another reform which we did, we have implemented the 4th Anti-Money Laundering Directive and Capital Requirements Directive. So it's not true that we have not implemented the 4th Directive. We have implemented it as soon as possible after the elections, because we had elections in June, and it is now part of our statute. But one thing which I would like to point out, that there have been innuendos here that Malta is facing a risk of serious breach of the rule of law or European values. It's an innuendo. You can feel it in the room. People claiming that Malta, is facing a risk of serious breach of rule of law. And I have to report to this European Parliament that there is consensus by both the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition in Malta that this is not the case. In fact, yesterday, the leader of the opposition in Malta has clearly pointed out that he is against this assertion that there is a serious risk of breach of rule of law or European values. And he would be totally against, and I'm being very clear here, on the imposition of Article 7 against Malta. So this is what I wanted to say here in the European Parliament. I would like to invite the members of Parliament to engage in a healthy and constructive debate. We are here to answer questions. We are here to provide answers, to tell you the true picture, what is happening in Malta, and how what we are doing to strengthen the rule of law, which is close to our heart, which is the basis of our democracy, the basis of our European value, and it is the reason why people like me and all the rest of the government are giving their lives and their careers to make Malta a better place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bonici.
who denounces all findings acts disrespectfully and non-credible. I would like to say that to you.
Please keep the order in the room. Now I turn to the Commission.
Thank you.
Mr. Aristotelis Gavrisiadis, 2 minutes. You got some questions. Try to be very short, please.
First of all, as regards the Anti-Money Laundering Directive, it was transposed in December 2017. So implementation is one thing, transposition is another thing, so the Commission is monitoring the implementation of the directive. As regards the 2 questions of Madame in 't Veld, the one about the citizenship by investment schemes, the Commission is monitoring closely the application of investor schemes, granting national citizenship in all Member States, including Malta. EU law requires that in the context of citizenship investor schemes, citizenship be awarded on the basis of a genuine connection between the application and the applicant and the country. The Commission and the Maltese authorities had reached an agreement on the Maltese investor scheme in January 2014. This agreement was conditional on applicants or citizens being asked to show effective residence in and genuine connection with Malta. The Commission continues to monitor closely the situation in Malta. As regards the issue of corruption, it is true that the annual report of corruption is not anymore there. But it's also true that for the first time this year, and I can assure you, there will be a very extensive section about corruption in the country report on Malta in the framework of the European semester. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now I would like to give the floor to the sons of Mrs. Daphne Caruana Galizia. You are welcome in the room, and in the committee meeting you have 2 minutes to intervene.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. We're very honored to have been given the floor. It's not something we expected. My brother and I came here today simply to show support for the work you're doing. My family and I have spent the last 3 months doing everything we can to fight for what are our basic rights. We filed a constitutional case in the Maltese court to have an independent police investigation. That's being fought by the government. But for us, it's also more than about our mother's murder investigation. That's the most urgent aspect, because our fear, our daily fear, is that every day that passes, the harder and harder it would be to find the people who actually commissioned this crime. The more time passes, the more evidence could disappear. The person leading the police investigation is someone our mother investigated. The Justice Minister himself is someone our mother investigated. It's very hard for us to have trust in the institutions of our country when the people our mother was investigating for extremely serious crimes remain in positions of power with influence over ongoing police investigations. But for us, it's also important that everything that our mother worked for does not disappear, is not forgotten. And the work that you do in the European Parliament is something that makes the load on our shoulders so much lighter. Your report, for example, vindicated so much of our mother's work. Everything that she spent the last 5 years writing about, almost everything is there on black and white in your report. And it's something that no one can now deny. So our mother is dead, but her work, at least through your work, has lived on. And if you stop your work, we won't stop, we'll continue, but it will be so much harder for us. So our message to you is, don't let anyone tell you that this is none of your business. This is not about politics. This is not a partisan contest. My brothers and I couldn't care less about that. We have no one who's representing us in our country at the moment, at least not in the leadership of any of the political parties. So for us, this is about basic European values, but it's also about European law. Malta has become a place of crime at a global level. It's a place where money from all over the world is laundered into the financial centers of Europe. It's toxifying European politics. It's also a country which has become a backdoor into the Schengen area. There are no real checks carried out on passport buyers. If there were, how could we explain that a Vietnamese member of parliament purchased a Maltese passport? So this is work that's fundamental not only to us as a family, not only to the hundreds of thousands of Maltese people who can now no longer read our mother's work, but it's also fundamental to millions of Europeans who want the integrity of the European project protected. So we're not experts in the European Parliament's work. We're not sure what tools you have at your disposal. You're not investigators, that's true. But you are creating a lot of pressure. And the more pressure you create, the more accountable my own government will be, the more accountable the European Commission will be. And that can lead to surprising results. So we encourage you not to lose heart, not to give in to criticism, and continue to do your duty. You're filling, at least in part, the shoes of our mother. And you're honoring her memory. It's not my role either to counter anything that the Minister of Justice has said. You've all become almost leading experts in the problems that Malta is currently facing. But I will say one thing, that the magisterial inquiry is currently underway, can only give the report when it's concluded to the Attorney General and to the police. And we know what the Maltese police does with reports of wrongdoing in the highest levels of the Maltese government. It sits on them. And that's the reason that reports from our anti-money laundering agency were leaked to the press. They were leaked only after they were given to the police, only after the police were clearly failing to act. And that's important to point out in a context where a whistleblower from the anti-money laundering agency now fears for his life, and where a source of our mother also fears for her life, and who's the subject of hate campaigns in the press, including by our own Prime Minister. So thank you for your work. You're giving us hope and courage for what we are trying to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Our thoughts and prayers are with you and your family, you have to know. And no, you want to intervene? Very short, please. 1 minute, Mrs. Gomez.
Yes. Just to say that the report was a collective work of the members of the mission. Then to take note of the availability of Minister Bonici to continue and to go through all the questions that were raised here and that were not raised but need to be clarified. So definitely we want to continue. This was also what came out of the comments made by all members. We expect to have Mr. Timmermans meeting the mission soon. We have also sent a report to the ECB and to the European Banking Authority for their action, namely in the framework of the recommendations we make. We have asked Chief Justice Camilleri to come to Brussels to meet with follow up with the members. We have asked documentation from German BKH, which was shared with the authorities of Malta, to also be shared with us. We have asked Pilatus Bank owner to come to us, and I am suggesting that in view of the discussion we had and the role played by this company, Henley and Partners, which has a legal status within the EU, who is lobbying as a lobbyist now, we call them as well to come. Definitely we're going to continue. I just would like to also note that the only fact of the 10 that I stated that was disputed by Minister Bonici was the fact that Anti-Money Laundering Directive 4 was now being implemented. Yes, apparently, according to what the Commission also referred, but that occurred after our visit. Our visit took place on the 31st of November and 1st of December. And I'm glad that this has been now notified to us. Is really important. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Gomez. Thank you for all of you colleagues. Thank you, Minister. And thank you for your understanding that we had to fit in this very short time frame. I won't give now the floor